Okay, it's totally my fault for getting distracted by other projects, but Season 2 of Hazbin Hotel is dropping later this month, probably even earlier by the time this video goes up, and I still have a lot to say about Season 1, particularly this season's writing, and I want to get my thoughts out there so I can more easily compare what I'm hoping to see from Season 2 with what we end up getting. So right off the bat, I think Hazbin Hotel gives itself a very strong foundation for a story. The setting of Hell is one that will immediately give the viewer an idea of what to expect from the show, which I think is a very smart move. I think a lot of writers, especially less experienced writers, have very big ambitions for the world that they've created in their heads, and it can feel like something of a cheap shortcut to just let your story take place somewhere that the audience will already be very familiar with. And I am aware of this feeling because some of my earliest narrative writing got hung up on this exact concept. But if you know that the audience is going to be able to fill in the gaps about questions they might otherwise have with a fictional setting thanks to their existing familiarity with it, you can more easily direct their attention towards the interesting things going on within that setting. Moreover, if you understand your audience's expectations, you can more easily subvert those expectations. Not that subverting audience expectation is inherently a good thing, it's just done well here. So what does just about everyone know about Hell? Well, generally, it's a place of nothing but suffering and chaos and pain. It's the opposite of heaven, and it's where all the horrible people go after they die, which means it's full of exclusively horrible people who deserve to be there. This, of course, tees up a very easy subversion, which is proving wrong that preconception of Hell, and in particular, the people who inhabit it. And I think that very simple idea of highlighting the contrast between the assumptions that we make about people deemed as sinners and the reality of why they are the way they are is where this show's core appeal comes from. It's a theme that has been expressed by countless other stories, but for good reason. It's a compelling lesson. However, I resonate more strongly with that theme when I'm watching Hazbin Hotel than most other shows that have a misunderstood underdog message. And I think that the fans of the show do as well, because more than ever before, the things that one would expect to get them sent to hell are being examined and questioned, especially by the target audience of this show, young people. I find it ironic that there have been so many cultural reactions, at least in the US, claiming that whatever media is currently capturing the youth's attention is demonic, because it kinda should be. Observing and learning about the activities and types of people that previous generations would deem demonic often teaches you a lot about the implicit criteria by which people in this society are judged. And it's a good thing for those criteria to be constantly scrutinized because they have so often been proven to be arbitrary and unfair. Of course, this isn't to say that, as our main character would put it, inside of every demon is a rainbow. There are demons in hell who have done unforgivably evil things, but the fact that our protagonists, the characters who are redeemable in the eyes of the audience at least, get lumped in with them by the angels in charge of heaven, tells us something about the criteria by which they are judged. And the more we learn about the demons who make up our group of protagonists, the more we can empathize with them, the more of an opportunity we have to evolve our ideas about how those who sin should be handled, or if they're even really sinning in the first place. Now, I'll lay my cards out on the table. If it wasn't already obvious, I do not strongly believe in punishment as an effective response to crime and even just unethical behavior generally. It should come as no surprise that someone like me would find the premise of rehabilitating people who have been damned to hell appealing. But just because a premise is appealing doesn't mean that the execution will be, and that's where I think this first season has room for improvement. If I had to summarize my biggest criticism of the way Hazbin Hotel executes its premise, it's that the show, by and large, explores less who the characters are and more what the characters are. I think that to most compellingly communicate that the angels are wrong to banish sinners to hell and then to massacre them, the show should be doing everything it can to make these characters feel as human and real as possible. But Season 1, more often than not, is primarily focused on progressing the plot. Nearly every moment of every scene is in some way setting up a conflict or highly impactful revelation which will occur later. And focusing on plot progression is not a bad thing at all. I like it when things happen in the shows I watch, but the plot would be a lot more engaging if, and this is gonna sound harsh, I cared more about the people who that plot is consequential to. The scene that is possibly the most emblematic of this issue to me comes in episode 3 when Vaggie is tasked with leading the main gang through a series of trust exercises, and because of her evidently military-style upbringing, decides that the best way to build their trust in one another is to throw everyone into the middle of a turf war. And once again, fantastic concept. Vaggie has already very naturally and effectively been characterized as a very untrusting person towards everyone who isn't Charlie. And the way that she chooses to try to instill trust between the other characters, i.e. by trauma bonding them together, is telling insight into how she came to be so attached to Charlie. It's also a great opportunity to actually give these characters an experience to share, something that will make them feel more like a group of friends who care about one another, because at this point, they don't. But then, after everyone falls down into the chaos below, we get this conversation between Vaggie and Charlie, where Vaggie expresses that she draws her self-worth from her capacity to materially benefit Charlie. And that's fine, I guess, but it's a conclusion about Vaggie that you could easily come to before this conversation, and will be spelled out even more explicitly after this conversation. However, this being an unnecessary character trait to be drawing explicit attention to is not the issue I have with this scene. It's that we watch this unnecessary exchange about the nature of these characters' relationships, while the actually important character development is literally happening right off screen. This show absolutely needs to make the residents of the hotel feel like a family. Their shared care for one another is what proves that they all have hearts of gold underneath their disturbing, sarcastic, and apathetic exteriors. It's one of the best ways to make them come across as endearing and relatable to the audience. And to really accomplish this, Season 1 definitely would have needed more than just this one scene of Nifty, Angel, Husk, and Serpentius getting into a turf war together, but it would have helped a lot. And it literally happens right off screen. And not even in a, oh, I guess as the audience we must assume that this happened off screen. No, we literally hear the battle going on below Charlie and Vaggie, we just actively are not being shown it. And then, similar to what I pointed out about Angel's character arc being treated as resolved after a single musical number, the show treats these characters moving forward like they really have formed some kind of kinship with one another after this sequence. I cannot stress this enough. These are exactly the kinds of low-stakes shenanigans that I would have wanted to see so much more of before we get super deep into the overarching heaven versus hell conflict. And it pains me to say that because I can tell that this is a very fleshed out world in the minds of the people working on it. Every tertiary character introduced has a lot of personality, and their places in this world all make perfect sense. I mean, most, if not all of them, are present in little background shots in the pilot, so these characters were obviously planned to play a notable role in the show from day zero, and it shows. But it can feel like the runtime just gets stretched thin trying to make sure all of them are present. For example, I remember having a conversation with my friend and fellow essayist Kittycraft a while back about how much I like the presentation of the relationship between Charlie and Vaggie. And I still do, I think they're endearing and adorable, but she pointed out to me that they really don't do much relationship stuff together. We see them together in their bedroom, and they console one another when they're discouraged, but there's so much more to romantic relationships than that, and I realized that I had developed a deeper understanding and attachment to these characters, largely via consuming fan art of them. Same deal for most of the other characters' relationships. And I know I'm not the only person this happened to. Go to the subreddit, click on any fan art, and just read the comments. Now, I do consider it a strength of the show that it has such attractive concepts and builds such strong foundations for its world and characters that the fans find it so easy to imagine that world and those characters beyond the scope of the narrative they originate from. But I also consider it an area ripe for improvement because without said headcanoning, there's just not that much content here. It would not be difficult to write many of the tertiary characters out of the story that Season 1 tells to help tighten it up, like Velvet or Carmilla or especially Rosie. I really do think she could have been cut. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that I think her place in the narrative is kind of siphoning off characterization that was sorely needed elsewhere in the main cast. As is, she serves as a resource that Charlie didn't know she had access to until she needed it, seeing as she is essentially the leader of Cannibal Town, and the hotel at this point in the story needs them as an army to defend against the impending extermination. Moreover, she and Alistair are close acquaintances, which means that connecting her to Charlie is yet another way that Alistair can ingratiate himself to Charlie. And most importantly, Rosie exists to give Charlie someone to vocalize her grievances to regarding last episode's reveal that Vaggie is an angel, and help restore her confidence in herself, which was shaken by that reveal, because she's gonna need it for the big climactic battle to come. These are all very important things that the show needs to get done, and that do get done in this episode. But in pursuit of expanding the cast of characters with interconnected relationships to make this world feel more lived in, successfully by the way, I think the creators missed a big opportunity, again, to make the bonds between the main characters feel more tangible. And again, I don't want to come across like I think I understand show writing better than the people whose job it is to write the show, but I think that this conversation should not be happening between Charlie and a character who she literally just met. Like, even the poster child for the overused trope of the main characters having a falling out right before the final act, Zootopia, at least had the main character regain her confidence in herself and her partner by reconnecting her with her parents and childhood bully, whose relationships with the main character actually have pre-established narrative weight to be built off of. Why is this conversation not being had between Charlie and Angel Dust, or Charlie and Husk? This conversation shares so much in common with the one Husk and Angel have in episode 4. I can so easily hear them saying,
"It can be difficult to admit to things you're not proud of, especially if those things hurt the ones you love. She fucked up, sure. She's flawed, but hey, who down here isn't?"
Like, come on, giving these characters the opportunity to convince Charlie to trust other people again, and to help get her back on her feet after she worked relentlessly to do the same for them, even when they weren't receptive to it, would be the perfect way to prove that Charlie's efforts haven't been in vain this whole time, and make these characters feel like they've actually grown attached to one another to the extent that they'd risk their lives to fight alongside each other in combat. I mean, for fuck's sake, the last time we saw the whole gang at the beginning of episode 7, they were shitting all over Vaggie and Charlie's unsuccessful efforts to convince Heaven not to exterminate them, just like in the beginning of the show. And I'm not saying they don't have any reason to be upset here, it just establishes their pessimistic perspective at this point in the story, and episode 7's whole purpose is to turn that perspective around. But yet again, the group bonding happens off-screen, as Charlie and Vaggie return to the hotel, finding, to their surprise, that everyone is still there. And this is, of course, a sweet moment, but I'd take the previously described hypothetical rallying conversation between Charlie and these characters over this little sweet moment any day of the week. And you could totally still have all the plot utility that Rosie offers the show, and probably even more if you did it that way. Like, what if instead of Alistair suggesting Charlie recruit Cannibal Town, he forced Husk to take Charlie to a bar he used to tend, and convince all the demons there to fight with them? Then Charlie still gets to learn about a community of people who can help her, which she didn't know existed, Alistair still gets to use one of his connections to ingratiate himself to Charlie, and Charlie still gets a shoulder to cry on that has more emotional weight. Plus, we all expect Alistair to betray Charlie eventually, so if that happens, it's not going to be the most heartbreaking thing in the world, but if Husk was made to help and then later forced to betray Charlie on Alistair's behalf, now that would really twist in the knife. Okay, I'm starting to write fanfiction here when I should be criticizing the actual show that exists, so I'll just say that trimming the fat, particularly regarding the tertiary characters and interconnected political-esque maneuverings they all engage in, would have given Hazbin Hotel more time to focus on the elements that I think give it its core appeal. And I know it's ironic for me to criticize Hazbin Hotel for having too many characters, considering I defended the pilot against exactly this accusation, but in my defense, I thought they'd have more than just 8 22-minute episodes for season 1. And although I keep talking about what I feel is the core appeal of the show, it should be made clear that the creators may have a totally different idea of what makes this show entertaining and interesting. If their aim was to set up this great big fleshed out world with a bunch of different moving parts and a big overarching plot, I think they did about as good a job as they could have considering the constraints they were working under. Moreover, none of the issues I take with the writing of Season 1 are unfixable moving forward. Season 2 very well may show us all of the low-stakes endearing moments that I think Season 1 could have used, and the problem will be solved. Maybe Season 2 will continue expanding the world so effectively that it won't feel like a missed opportunity if that's all it focuses on. Maybe it'll just do both. This show has proven itself to be successful enough for continuation, so hopefully now that the creative staff has been given exactly what Season 1 needed, more screen time, they won't have to compromise character building for plot progression. At least, that's how I'd describe it. Now, obviously, with Season 2 being so close to release, I know that if it addresses any of the hopes or concerns I've laid out for it in this video, it will have been by sheer coincidence. And even ignoring my procrastinating over making this video, I'd never expect the creators of Hazbin Hotel to change their creative vision or plans for this project to appease someone like me. I talk about this show because it's fun to talk about, and I hope other people feel the same. I think this show gets a lot of undue hate, so I just want to be clear that regardless of how good I feel Hazbin Hotel is, I'm very grateful to its creators for giving us something that is so fun to talk about. And if you have fun talking about this show, I sure would love it if you shared your thoughts on it in the comments. That's about it for me, so as always, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one.